Have you ever caught yourself thinking, "Forget it, it's not worth the argument, I'm better than this"? You feel the anger rise in your throat, words form perfectly in your mind, the truth sits poised on the tip of your tongue. And yet, you swallow it, you breathe it in, and you walk away. You convince yourself that silence is strength, that restraint is nobility, that by saying nothing, you are proving your emotional maturity. But let me ask you something. What if, in that very moment, you're not being strong, but simply betraying yourself? We live in a world that celebrates a hollow version of peace. From childhood, we're taught that being nice is more important than being honest. That avoiding conflict is a badge of honor. That if something bothers you, you should smile, stay quiet, and be the bigger person. But here's the brutal truth. Much of what we call politeness is just fear. Wearing a polite mask, fear of confrontation, fear of upsetting others, fear of being labeled difficult, angry, or too emotional, fear of losing someone's approval, or love. And so, we sacrifice our voice at the altar of harmony. We make ourselves small so that others don't feel uncomfortable. We shrink, we fold, we fade just to keep the peace. But peace bought at the price of your dignity, that's not peace, that's self-erasure. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw through this illusion with brutal clarity. He called it slave morality, a set of values created by those who couldn't fight back. The powerless, the silenced, the resentful. Those who couldn't express their pain or anger turned their weakness into a virtue. They painted submission as humility. They romanticized silence as wisdom. But at its core, it was fear. And over generations, that fear became a way of life. Now, people think they are being good by letting things go, but what they're actually doing is surrendering. Think about it. How many injustices have you tolerated, not because they were okay, but because you didn't want to cause a scene? How many times have you endured disrespect, not because you didn't notice it, but because you were afraid to speak? How many moments did you allow yourself to be walked over, simply because you didn't want to be the angry one? You call it maturity, you call it control. But inside, your soul is screaming for justice. This isn't a call to rage. I'm not asking you to turn every slight into a war. This isn't about becoming combative. It's about reclaiming your right to exist without apologizing for it. It's about giving yourself permission to be seen, heard, and respected. You are not a burden because you speak your mind. You are not selfish for drawing boundaries. You are not aggressive for demanding basic respect. The world has trained you to believe that silence equals strength. But sometimes, silence is the loudest form of surrender. Yes, there will be times when you need to hold your tongue, when patience is wisdom. But that should be your choice, not your fear. You should never silence yourself just to make others comfortable, because every time you do, you disappear just a little. And piece by piece, you lose who you are. You were not born to be agreeable. You were not born to be everyone's doormat. You were not born to be a quiet background character in your own story. You were born to take up space, to stand tall in your truth, to speak, even if your voice shakes. So no, don't go picking fights for fun. That's not power, that's ego. But when your values are disrespected, when someone crosses a boundary, when your spirit says, "This is not okay," listen to it. That voice is not your weakness. That voice is your soul trying to defend you. You are not being too much. You are not being overly sensitive. You are simply reclaiming the dignity you never should have had to give up in the first place. And maybe it's time you stopped calling that maturity and started calling it what it really is: fear. Let this be the moment you stop betraying yourself for peace. Not every battle is worth fighting, but your voice, your dignity, your truth, always worth it. Why avoiding conflict is slowly destroying you? Because here's the truth. If you don't learn how to face conflict, it will consume you from within. It doesn't disappear. It festers. Every time you silence your voice, every time you suppress your truth, a tiny flame of resentment ignites. It burns slowly, quietly, but with time, it spreads. Until one day, you explode. Or worse, you shut down completely. You become numb. You become apathetic. You start to believe that being good means being harmless, that to be loved, you must never be a source of friction. But what if I told you that's a lie? What if conflict, far from being your enemy, is actually the key to your liberation? Because nature doesn't ask us to be harmless. Nature demands that we be honest, real, alive. And Nietzsche, yes, the brilliant, uncomfortable, unflinching Friedrich Nietzsche, offered a way out of this cycle of silence. He proposed a philosophy not of fear, but of power, not of submission, but of affirmation, not of enduring pain quietly, but of transforming pain into strength. In this video, we're going to dive deep into Nietzsche's radical ideas about the fear of confrontation, ideas that remain more relevant today than ever. By the end, you'll understand how a morality you didn't choose still quietly governs your life, and more importantly, how you can break free from it. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see yourself forever. To understand your fear of conflict, you have to go deeper than your personal history. This fear is not just about your past traumas or the way your parents raised you, it's baked into the very moral framework of modern society. Nietzsche, in his groundbreaking work, On the Genealogy of Morals, explained this better than anyone. He asked a difficult question. Where do our values come from? Why do we see humility as good and power as bad? Why do we praise self-denial, obedience, and passivity, and look down on ambition, strength, and pride? The answer, Nietzsche said, is brutal. And it starts with a war, not a war of armies, but a war of values. Imagine a world before modern laws and governments, a time when raw strength ruled the earth. In that world, the noble men, the warriors, leaders, conquerors, lived by what Nietzsche called a master morality. They created values based on action, courage, power, and self-assertion. To them, good was whatever elevated life, whatever expressed their will, whatever made them stronger. They didn't ask for permission to exist. They didn't apologize for taking up space. They didn't deny themselves to please others. But then, there were the others. The weak, the oppressed, the ones who couldn't win in a world ruled by power. They couldn't challenge the strong directly. So, they did something else. They rewrote the rules of the game. They turned strength into evil. They labeled pride as arrogance. They said those who dominated were sinners, and in that reversal, they elevated their own weakness as virtue. Humility became holy. Obedience became sacred. Suffering became meaningful. But don't be fooled. This didn't come from a place of love or enlightenment. It came from resentment, from helplessness, and it's still controlling you. Today, you might think all this sounds ancient, irrelevant, but it's not. This morality is alive. It's in the air you breathe. It's in your schools, your religion, your family dinners, your polite little phrases. Don't respond. Be the bigger person. Let it go. Don't make a scene. Be nice. From the time you were a child, you were trained to fear confrontation, to equate silence with maturity, to believe that being good meant swallowing your feelings. And so you grew up thinking that standing up for yourself is rude, that expressing anger is dangerous, that demanding respect is aggressive. You learned to fear your own power every time you bit your tongue, every time you nodded in fake agreement, every time you let someone cross your boundary just to keep the peace. You weren't just avoiding conflict, you were reinforcing a morality of submission. And let's be clear, this isn't about becoming a loud, aggressive person who fights everyone. It's about recognizing that your fear of being disliked, of being seen as too much, is not a sign of moral superiority. It's a learned behavior, and it's keeping you small. If you keep choosing silence, this is what happens. You build resentment like layers of dust on a mirror, and one day, you can't even see yourself anymore. You begin to confuse peace with numbness. You stop feeling, you stop caring, and eventually, you stop trying. Your relationships become fake. Your self-worth becomes fragile. Your anger turns inward and festers as anxiety, depression, or self-loathing. Because deep down, your soul knows you've been betraying yourself. Nietzsche never said we should all become tyrants. He wasn't glorifying cruelty or chaos. What he offered was something else. A call to rise above both victimhood and domination, to create your own values, to speak your truth without fear, to stop apologizing for being real. Conflict isn't the enemy. Avoidance is, because real peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth, from boundaries, from the courage to say, "This matters to me." So the next time your voice trembles, but your heart knows what's right, speak. The next time someone oversteps your boundary, say no. The next time the world tells you to be small, take up space. Are you ready? Are you ready to unlearn the lies that were fed to you in the name of politeness? Are you ready to trade fear for strength, silence for voice, submission for self-respect? Then stay with me, because the truths you've heard here today, they're uncomfortable for a reason. They threaten a system that relies on your obedience. But if you can face that discomfort, if you can walk through the fire of confrontation, you won't just find your voice, you'll find yourself. You are being governed by a morality you didn't choose, a morality that tells you, don't make waves. Let it go. Be the bigger person. And here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not because you're naturally weak or submissive, you were trained this way, indoctrinated. From your earliest memories, you were told that asserting yourself was wrong, that expressing anger was childish, that saying no made you difficult. You were conditioned to believe that being good is the same as being harmless, but being harmless is not the same as being good. You think you're being mature when you avoid conflict? You think silence is strength? You tell yourself, I'm rising above it? But be honest, are you rising above or running away? Because what you call maturity may actually be fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of losing approval, fear of not being liked, fear of being seen as selfish or aggressive or too much. And the more you flee, the more this fear grows inside you. The stronger this false morality becomes. It buries itself deep into your psychology, feeding off your silence. But there's an even darker consequence. Every time you suppress your voice, every time you let someone cross your boundary without protest, something inside you begins to rot. That something is resentment, and that will be the theme of this next part. Let's talk about one of the most corrosive forces in human psychology, a silent destroyer of relationships, of dignity, of self-respect. Nietzsche called it ressentiment. The French word he used to describe something far more toxic than simple envy or anger. Resentment is what happens when your natural, vital impulse to act, to defend yourself, to speak out, to say no, is denied over and over again. But that energy doesn't just vanish. It turns inward. It doesn't explode. It ferments. It becomes a slow-burning acid that corrodes your inner life. And worse, it disguises itself as moral superiority. In On the Genealogy of Morals, Friedrich Nietzsche offers one of the most brutal but enlightening dissections of the human soul ever written. He explains that resentment arises not from action, but from paralysis. A person wants to strike back, but doesn't. They want to speak their truth. But stay silent, they want to draw a line, but fear what might happen. So what do they do instead? They rewrite the story. I'm better because I don't react. I'm more evolved because I forgive. I'm noble because I stay silent. But it's a lie. It's not forgiveness. It's repression. It's not nobility. It's fear. It's not peace. It's a cage. Even if you don't call it resentment, you felt it. Every time someone offended you and you said nothing, then spent hours replaying the conversation in your head, imagining what you should have said. That's resentment. Every time someone overstepped your boundary, and instead of confronting them, you smiled and said it was fine, but later felt bitterness boiling in your chest. That's resentment. Every time you stayed silent to keep the peace, but then lay awake at night, angry at yourself for not standing up, that's resentment. And here's the worst part, the more you repress, the more bitter you become. The more bitter you become, the less strength you have to take action. It's a vicious cycle that pulls you deeper into helplessness. Nietzsche warns us, the resentful person is not just a victim, they are also an accomplice to their own suffering. By refusing to confront, by hiding behind a fake mask of goodness, they lock themselves in a prison of passivity. Eventually, this condition becomes so familiar, so habitual, that they begin to identify with it. They become proud of their martyrdom, proud of being the one who stays silent, proud of being the one who suffers in silence for the sake of peace. But this pride is hollow. It's not virtue. It's fear dressed as virtue. Here's the truth. You were not born to be silent. You were not born to be stepped on. You were not born to carry unspoken rage like a stone in your gut. You were born with a voice, with instincts, with strength, and you have every right to claim your space in this world. Nietzsche believed we are not condemned to a life of resentment. There is a way out, a path of radical transformation, a path where you stop running, stop hiding, stop swallowing your rage, a path that reclaims your power. So, what's the cure to resentment? How do you break the chains of this slave morality? Nietzsche gives us an answer, his most iconic idea, the will to power. But don't misunderstand it. This is not about domination. It's not about becoming a tyrant or oppressing others. The will to power is the deep inner force that says, I have a right to exist, I have a right to speak. I will not apologize for being who I am. I will shape my life, not wait for someone to grant me permission. It's not about becoming violent, it's about becoming authentic. It's not about picking fights, it's about ending your war with yourself. The first step toward reclaiming your power is to confront the lie. The lie that says conflict is bad. The lie that says speaking up is selfish. The lie that says silence is strength. It is not. Strength is setting boundaries. Strength is saying no without guilt. Strength is refusing to betray yourself to keep others comfortable. Start small if you must. Say what you mean. Speak your truth, push back when it matters. Each time you do this, you chip away at the walls of your invisible prison. Each time you resist the urge to fold, to submit, to play small, you grow stronger. This is not about becoming someone else, it's about becoming who you were before. They taught you to be afraid. Real peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of truth. And if you want peace within, you must be willing to disturb the peace without. You must be willing to lose approval, to be misunderstood, to be disliked. Because the price of being liked by everyone is too high. If it means losing yourself, let go of the fake harmony. Let go of the silent resentment. Let go of the identity built on fear, and choose instead to live with power. If this message resonates with you, then you're not alone. Millions of people are quietly suffering behind masks of politeness and niceness. But you don't have to be one of them. Start by confronting the resentment within you. Recognize it, understand it, don't judge it, learn from it. Then begin to act. Not recklessly, not out of revenge, but with clarity, with courage, because your life is not meant to be a quiet apology. It's meant to be a full-throated yes to existence. And Nietzsche, he wasn't offering easy answers, but he gave us something better, a map out of the swamp of passive suffering, a challenge to reclaim the power we were taught to fear. Are you ready to rise? Then remember, you are not here to be harmless. You are here to be whole.